It began as a grand industrial monument, built on the ambitious dreams of a newly independent nation. But instead of thriving, it spent decades rusting away into a symbol of death. But just when everyone thought it was dead, it suddenly roared back to life. In this video, we break down what happened to Ghana's Tema Oil Refinery, from its visionary beginnings and near-fatal controversies to its modern-day comeback. Constructed during the same period as the Akosombo Dam, the refinery seemed to be the crucial second half of Ghana's energy independence equation. The logic was undeniable. Why should Ghana import refined fuel when it could process crude itself? To execute this, Nkrumah's government partnered with the Italian energy group Eni to establish the Ghanaian-Italian Petroleum Company. Built in the industrial hub of Tema and officially opening in 1963, it immediately put Ghana on the map, ranking as one of the 6 largest refineries in Africa. When it launched, the facility could process 28,000 barrels of crude oil per day. But during these early decades, it operated strictly as a tolling refinery. It didn't buy its own raw crude. Instead, multinational oil companies paid the facility a processing fee to turn their raw crude into usable petroleum products. Ghana gradually bought out its Italian partners until it took complete state ownership in 1977. By 1991, it was renamed the Tema Oil Refinery to reflect its local identity. Then came a major turning point. In 1996, TOR shifted to a different business model. Instead of simply refining crude oil for international companies, it began purchasing crude itself, refining it, and marketing the finished products. The business model also meant TOR had to process more crude to meet growing domestic demand. To support this expansion, the refinery embarked on 2 major upgrades. First, in 1997 was the upgrading of its crude distillation unit, increasing processing capacity from 28,000 to 45,000 barrels per day. Second was the investment of $230 million in a residue fluid catalytic cracking unit, allowing it to convert more crude into higher value products. For the first time, TOR controlled almost every stage of the business, from crude oil purchase to fuel sold at the pump. But this very business model that expanded TOR's role would soon expose it to risks it had never faced before. So how did this crown jewel fall apart? The answer lies in politics and the price at the pump. Between 1999 and 2000, global crude oil prices shot up, and TOR had to buy crude at high international rates. However, the Ghanaian government refused to let TOR raise domestic fuel prices. While government promised to pay the company the difference, those reimbursements rarely arrived on time. To keep buying crude and supplying fuel, TOR borrowed heavily from local and international banks, and what began as a temporary financing problem gradually became a debt crisis. By 2003, the refinery owed an estimated $320 million to $450 million. Government attempted to rescue the refinery financially. An introduced TOR debt recovery levy required every fuel purchase to contribute towards paying off TOR's debt. The debt could have been cleared by 2008 according to the African Center for Energy Policy, but successive governments diverted the funds to other public spending. By 2010, TOR's debt had climbed to about $1.4 billion. A second intervention followed in through the Energy Sector Levies Act, and although it eased part of the debt burden, it did not restore the working capital TOR needed to consistently purchase crude. The government eventually deregulated fuel prices in 2015, but by then, the damage had already been done. TOR's debt had grown so large that banks stopped extending credit altogether. And so no financing meant no crude purchases. No crude purchases meant no crude to refine. And without crude to refine, the CDU and RFCC were shut down. Therefore, TOR stopped refining oil in 2018. Not because it had lost the ability to, but because it no longer had crude to process. The refinery now survived mainly by renting out its storage tanks for imported refined fuel. But even as Tor was struggling under debt and shrinking operations, another chapter in Ghana's energy story was unfolding offshore. In 2007, Ghana finally struck oil at the Jubilee field. For nearly 5 decades, Tor had processed imported crude, but at last, Ghana's own refinery stood on the brink of refining Ghana's own oil. Or so it seemed. Instead of a straightforward transition, a debate unfolded. Now, Jubilee crude is a high-grade, sweet light oil. On one side, government officials argued that Tor, built in the 1960s, was designed to run on heavier, lower-grade crude. They warned that processing Jubilee crude with its current equipment would produce fuel that failed to meet quality standards. On the other side, the refinery's own engineers and management fiercely disputed this. They argued that Jubilee's profile was 100% compatible with their existing equipment. Caught between these conflicting technical claims and a tough economic reality, the government made a calculated choice. Because Jubilee crude commanded top dollar on the global market, it was highly profitable to export and use the cash to import refined fuel. Consequently, Ghana fell into a striking economic paradox, being rich in oil and possessing its own refinery, while importing refined fuel to power its local economy. By 2021, Tor was a ghost town. To restart operations without another government bailout, Tor's board pursued a private sector solution. In 2022, it proposed leasing the refinery's production assets to a company called Torrentco Asset Management Limited. Under the proposal, Torrentco would invest $22 million to rehabilitate the refinery, pay annual rent, and cover Tor's operating costs. Almost immediately, the proposal came under intense scrutiny. Workers' unions and independent policy groups opposed the lease. The government's own due diligence revealed that Torrentco lacked the finances and expertise to operate Tor. Facing mounting legal and public pressure, Torrentco withdrew its proposal, and Tor remained exactly where it had been before, silent, indebted, and searching for a path back to refining. Nearly 2 years after the Torrentco deal collapsed, Tor entered a new chapter. Under new management in 2025, serious efforts began to restore the refinery to operation. One reality had become impossible to ignore. Ghana was spending nearly $400 million every month importing refined petroleum products. A figure Tor's acting MD noted a fully operational refinery could cut by more than 60%. Using internally generated funds, Tor embarked on a 3-month turnaround maintenance program. Engineers worked around the clock to start the crude distillation unit, and by the end of 2025, after 4 years of silence, Tor was operational once again. But one obvious question remained. If the refinery had shut down because it lacked crude oil, not because it had lost the ability to refine, where would that crude come from? To overcome that hurdle, management revisited a familiar strategy: tolling. Instead of purchasing crude itself, international suppliers would provide the oil while Tor processed it for a fee. That approach reached its first major milestone in May 2026, when Tor received 1 million barrels of Nigeria's Bonga crude for processing. After years on the sidelines, Ghana's national refinery is refining crude again. The Tema Oil Refinery has survived political meddling, crashing debt, and a near-death experience. But Ghana's refining landscape has also changed. A few miles down the road, a Chinese-backed facility called Tema Oil Refinery has opened its doors. Boasting newer technology and a larger processing capacity, Tema means Tor is no longer the only game in town. Tor's success will depend on its ability to secure reliable crude supply, maintain sound management, and enforce financial discipline. After more than 6 decades of ambition, controversy, and failure, Tor is alive again. Now, It has to prove that it can stay alive. This has been a Finex Insights Data Story. Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe. See you in our next one.